We have successfully replaced the event handler that navigates the user to the register page, as well as the event handler that registers the user. It's time for us to implement the latest command that we are missing, and that is to replace the toolbar item _ clicked event handler. But this one is the trickiest one, because this one is going to require a selected venue, and then from the selected venue get a first category. We are currently already getting the post's experience and assigning it to the post directly through data binding. But all of the other properties are being set by getting the selected venue and then getting the first category from that selected venue. For this, we are going to first need a venue inside of the post object, because currently it doesn't have a venue. We have to get all of the values from the venue and then assign those values to the corresponding properties. Things are going to be a little bit easier if the post class contains a complete venue as well. So I am going to open the post class and I am going to define another property. I am not going to be deleting any of the properties that already exist, but I am going to be defining another full property of type venue that is going to be called venue. And just like with any other property, I am going to be calling the onPropertyChanged method from the setter of the property. And since the venue object now contains all of the information for the rest of the properties, we can actually copy the code that we currently have from the one that gets the first category from the venue to the one that assigns a value to each of the properties and paste it right after setting the value to the venue and before calling the onPropertyChanged. One small change that we have to do in here, of course, is getting the value from the venue instead of the selected venue, and that we don't have a post object, but we don't really need it because we are on the post class, so we can access the property themselves. It is very important that you use the property and not the local private variables, because by setting the property, we make sure that every time we set a value, the onPropertyChanged method is fired. Otherwise, if we set the variable directly, well, the variable is never going to call the onPropertyChanged. So just make sure that you do this directly to the property. So now that we have this venue and that from the venue we're assigning the value through each of the rest of the properties, we don't really need the code that was getting the first category and then setting the value for the rest. And there is something else that we can do in here. We are already setting the post as the binding context for the container stack layout. And the post now has a venue. So we can go to the SAML file, go to the list view, and set the selected item to be binding to venue, and do it in a two-way mode. The venue, again, is now a property inside of the post object. And since we are now getting that selected venue or that venue through data binding, we don't need this variable in here. The only thing that the command has to do then is insert the post and display certain alerts. So let's create a view model that is going to have this functionality. Inside of the view model folder, I am going to create a new class that is going to be new travel VM. And the new travel VM class is going to be public, and it will have a public async. I know this is going to be async because we are going to be posting something to the internet. Right now I'm going to define it as void, and this is going to be called publish post. And it will receive the post that it is going to publish. To be able to use the post class, we add the corresponding using directive to its namespace. And then inside of the publish post method, we are going to paste the current functionality that is in the event handler. And we won't be needing an event handler anymore. I am going to paste it, and of course we do not need these comments that we had for when we were insetting into a local database. What we do need is to access the display alert differently, because this is not a page, so we have to go to app.current.mainPage to display that alert. And the same for the other two places where we are displaying an alert. So this is the functionality, but we do need the command. So inside of the commands folder, I am going to add a new class that is going to be post command. This one, of course, has to be public and to implement the iCommand interface. Again, the first thing that I want to do is change the canExecute method. In here, I am going to get first the post. And this is simply going to be performed by casting as post the parameter that we have received in the method. And we do need a using directive for this. And now the parameter has been set as post. Then I will evaluate if post is different than null. If it isn't, then I'm going to return false. If it is different than null, I first want to evaluate if the experience is not null or empty. So I'm going to evaluate is null or empty for the post.experience. And if it is null or empty, I am also going to return false. And then I want to evaluate if the venue itself is different than null. If it is different than null, then I am going to return true. Otherwise, I will return false. So I will only return true when the post is different than null, and the experience is not null nor empty, and the venue is different than null as well. In all of the other scenarios, I'm going to be returning false. Now to the execute method. In here we're going to call the latest method that we have defined inside of the new travel page VM class. For that, I am going to need a VM variable. So I will define the new travel VM variable as a viewModel variable. I'm going to define the constructor, which in its parameter is going to require a new travel VM object, and then set the local viewModel to the viewModel that is being received in the arguments of the constructor. With this object, back in the execute method, we can access the viewModel and its publish post method, which is going to require a post. And we're going to get the post in the same way that we just did in the canExecute method. I am going to define the post as the parameter being cast as a post. And then this, I can pass it to the publish post method. And the command is ready. All we have to do now is head back to the new travel page and define a property, which is going to be of type post command. We add the using directive, we set the name, and inside of the constructor, we're going to initialize its value. So post command is going to be equal to a new post command, and we will need to pass this as the viewModel. And inside of this class, we're also going to define another property, which is going to be the venue. And we're going to initialize its value from the constructor as well. And that's it. That's everything we need inside of the viewModel. Now, back in the C# file for the new travel page, we no longer need this post variable that we were defining, but we do need a new travel VM. I will add the using directive to its namespace and define this as viewModel. And we will also need another property inside of the VM, which is going to be of type post. And we're going to be initializing this from the constructor as well. And since we already have a post in the VM, back in the new travel page, we can get rid of the post that we were defining and instead define a new travel VM object, which is going to be called viewModel. We have to initialize it inside of the constructor. And instead of defining the binding context for the container stack layout, we're going to define the binding context to the entire page to the viewModel. But we still need to set the binding context of that container stack layout to the post of the viewModel. It will still be bound to the post, only this time the post exists in the viewModel instead of on the current page. So in the SAML file, we have to get the stack layout and set its